This summer, the Miami Hurricanes will be laying the foundations for another top 5 recruiting class, but here's how you get that over the finish line.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, also co-host of Locked On ACC. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. With our special guest today, we will be talking about Miami's roster transformation through the transfer portal and about that one move that Miami still seems to be looking to make. I want to talk about how NIL has really changed the transfer landscape. I mean, I know the transfer rules in themselves have already changed, but you've got some big-time players agreeing to be walk-ons, which I don't think would be possible without NIL, but I do want to talk some recruiting as well. Very happy to welcome back to the program. He's hit home runs the last couple times he's been on the show. Our pal Dante from Q Sports Media. Dante, happy Friday morning to you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Donno. How are you? And also, happy Friday.
Yeah, man, I'm doing really well. And so, okay, we're really starting to talk about recruiting materializing. Miami already has 7 verbal commits, of course, for 2025, including to Kalen TK Mew, the newest commit for the offensive line that came down last night. But really, most of the foundation laying is going to be happening this summer with all those big-time official visits that are coming through. Got a question from Jim, one of our Locked On Canes insiders, who asked, hey, I would like to hear a conversation about what December signing day will look like if Miami plays to their potential. And that's why, for me, Dante, and yes, Miami has done exceptionally well the last 2 cycles in recruiting, right? After going 5-7 in 2022, they locked up a top 10 recruiting class. After going 7-6 in 2023, they locked up a top 5 recruiting class. If Miami can win 9, 10, 11 games this year, I think that's when you're going to have an easier time getting players like 5-star defensive back DJ Pickett over the finish line, like 5-star receivers Dallas Wilson and Jaime Ffrench, getting players like that over the finish line, 4-star interior offensive lineman SJ Alofaituli, top linebacker Gavin Nix, like some of the highest profile players Miami is going after. If you get wins on the field, Dante, this could be a whole different animal this year. We could be talking about a top 3 class instead of a top 5 class.
100%. I agree. Some of the guys that you mentioned, like Pickett, Booker Pickett's brother, who's from Tampa, I believe a guy like him really cares about what's going on. And like me and you talked about earlier, the Miami and Florida game, that first game is going to be huge for a lot of these Florida recruits to watch, because the Miami versus Florida battle is always going to be something serious, as long with the Florida State. And this year, is the first year in a while that we've had a state championship. And that's going to be huge for recruiting, especially for guys like Pickett, guys like Vernell Brown, who just announced his top 4. And it was Florida State, Florida, Miami, and of course, the wide receiver as of now, Ohio State. Guys, some of the guys from Homestead, like the wide receiver
Mills.
Cortez Mills, and also a lot of those guys play for Raw Miami as well, which has also been a great connection for us. I believe, though, at the end of the day, this year is huge for us in recruiting. And like you mentioned, the last 2 years have been great regardless of our record. And if this year is the year where we make it to the college football playoffs, 9 to 10 wins, a nice bowl game, we're feeling good about ourselves. The last 2 years have been growing years, and we've had great recruiting classes. If we have a great year this year, I believe that this recruiting class will definitely be top 3.
Yeah, because I look at a lot of people say, well, hey, they had a top 5 class last year and it wasn't a great season, right? I mean, they won more games than they lost, but 7-6 was not really anything to hang your hat on. Miami fans deserve better and expect better than that. So the way that I look at it, Dante, for those first couple of full Mario Cristobal recruiting classes, I think it's a little bit easier to sell top recruits on what you're building. But then after the third year, I think you've got to sell recruits on what you've built. Like if Miami does, no pressure, Miami, but I don't think Miami can have another top 5 class if they go 7-6 again this year. I think you're going to have to win 9 or more games to have another top 5 class. Because at a certain point, if you don't start winning big, those recruits are going to say, well, hold on, you were promising wins the last couple of years. It still hasn't happened. When is it going to happen? So, and Miami, I think it's going to get some big time verbal commits this summer. I mean, you look at the visit list, it's insane. But as we see so much, Dante, and you cover recruiting, how many flips you have around the country, between, if a player commits in July, that recruitment stays open until they put pen to paper in December. So if you want to hold on to the guys you land this summer, plus there's always some big time South Florida kids who don't actually decide until signing day. If you want to get those over the finish line, you can't go 7-6 again this year. Like you're talking 9-10 wins is what you need this season.
I agree. But what I do want to say is I do believe that a lot of these recruits that are coming in, me and you both went to spring practices and we got to see a lot of the family vibes that the school gives us. All the youth teams that come in and watch practice, the high school teams that come in and watch practice. And it's a family environment. These guys all know each other. They all know about Miami, the struggles. It gets talked about. You get to talk to coaches like Coach Rumpf, former running back Davenport. A lot of these guys I was able to talk to, and we were talking about just how Miami's feel right now is very family oriented, and a lot of recruits are liking that, especially these South Florida recruits, because at the end of the day, these kids don't mind staying home. They haven't stayed home because the setup of our school hasn't been the greatest, which is, you just got to admit it. And I do think that the record that we have, if it is 9 or 10 wins, I think that'll just be a boost to what our recruiting is at right now.
Who do you is there anybody from this class coming up you look at as like the must get guy? Because like for me, like the number one target on my board, number one, not necessarily the must get guy, but DJ Pickett is the number one target on my board, one of the best players in the country. Usually when I'm talking about a must get guy, it's usually a local, and I think Chris Ewald might be that guy out of Chaminade, the 4-star defensive back. I think that guys like that who are local must gets, the same way, Ruben Bain was a must get a couple of years ago, that sort of thing. Is there anybody else you put into that category? Like Miami must lock up this guy in this class.
Yes. So Luke Nickel, he's already locked up. That would be my answer. Yeah. But since he's already locked up, one guy that I really did enjoy watching at a lot of these 7-on-7 camps and just watching him work and the way he works, the way he moves, the way he runs his routes, the jump balls, and that would be Cortez Mills. I feel like his ability of playing the ball in the air is very lethal. I feel like he already has the body for an elite wide receiver, and with the training and weightlifting program that Miami has right now, with Cortez Mills joining that, I feel like he can just boost his game to a whole nother level. And Amari Cooper type, he has that like lower six. I believe he's 6'1". He's either 6'1" or 6'2". So he's a taller, 6'1". So he's a taller, lengthy wide receiver with a tremendous athletic ability. And that's one of the guys that I believe that if we can get him into the class this year, that would be awesome.
If I'm looking at like players from outside the area that I'd love to get, Miami's done so well recruiting in Chicago the last couple of years. I mean, you think about last year getting Justin Scott and Marquise Lightfoot out of that area. I would love for Miami to be able to grab Jose Epinesa, who's a 4-star. It's probably going to be a 5-star by the time they're done with all the ratings. Defensive lineman, 6'4", 230 pounds, out of Edwardsville, Illinois, Chicago area. He came down during spring football to check out Miami. He's got an official visit lined up for the final official visit weekend of June. Again, this is not necessarily a must get, but we've seen a national footprint in recruiting, Dante. I mean, Mario Cristobal, obviously you try to lock down the top kids in the area, but if you've got to go to Chicago, if you got to go into Georgia, if you've got to go into other parts of the Midwest to get your top guys, that's what they're going to do.
Exactly, and that's awesome. You want to get those kind of guys because a lot of those guys bring a different kind of culture that needs to be added into the Miami culture, which is more South Florida-based kids. So I believe the mesh when you bring those guys from Georgia and some of the Midwestern guys who bring that kind of that rugged game, like they're down to get to the nitty-gritty. Those guys, you need them, especially with some of these South Florida guys, because a lot of them got a chip on their shoulders. So they need some of these outside guys to come and bring that competition, kind of check them, let them know, hey, I'm here. Even though I'm not from here, I come from Chicago like Marquise Lightfoot. He's from the nitty-gritty. He's a tight-knit guy, which I also believe is the reason why Chicago's been a great area for us, because Chicago's a very tight-knit city, just like Miami. So I do agree that Marquise Lightfoot and Justin Scott additions were great, and I can't wait to watch them play this year.
We'll talk on the other side. What's been the most impactful addition for Miami in the transfer portal? Because the Hurricanes, I'm not going to say they've transformed their team, because a lot of the important guys from last season, Kiko, Xavier Restrepo, Ruben Bain, are still going to be foundational players from last year. But I believe Miami, in a lot of ways, has pushed their roster over the top. We're going to talk about it. We got our guy Dante, Q Sports Media, joining us. We're only getting started on this Friday. You want to keep it locked right here to Locked On Canes. The only ticket app that I use is Game Time. And if you want to know why, the last-minute deals or the deals you get months in advance are awesome. But, folks, if you're looking for last-minute deals, Miami Marlins at New York Mets at Miami Marlins, I should say, tonight at Lone Depot Park, $4 tickets available at Game Time. Practically a free ticket. Practically a free ticket to go out there and watch a Major League Baseball game. They do already have tickets on sale for the Miami Dolphins' first home game against Jacksonville at $93. That's a really good price. You can check it all out at Game Time. You're getting the absolute best deals. If you're in a market where the NBA playoffs are still going on, of course, in our market, the Stanley Cup playoffs are going on. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which means getting playoff tickets is even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying playoff tickets. And folks, we got a deal for you. If you haven't tried the Game Time app yet, try it now. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making this Friday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We got our pal Dante, Q Sports Media, is with us here on Locked On Canes. Dante, we last spoke after the winter portion of the transfer portal. We talked a lot about Cam Ward, which I think is the top addition that Miami made this offseason. But since that time in April, Hurricanes landed Damian Martinez. They landed Sam Brown at wide receiver, Jalen Alderman at linebacker, Deani Hill at defensive back. Miami, Simeon Barrow, which I think was a huge addition to the defensive line. They're still very much in the hunt for Tyler Barron, the former Tennessee defensive end. That one is obviously not done yet. But in terms of what Miami has added to this roster, who do you think is going to make the biggest impact?
So the biggest impact by far, I believe, will be Damian Martinez. And my reasoning is for that is because Mario has built this program based off of the nitty gritty trenches. He loves offensive linemen, right? Our offensive line is stout for this year. And not only is Damian Martinez going to be a great running back, but we also have Mark Fletcher as well. And if you look at the most recent national champions, it'd be the Michigan Wolverines. And if you look at their running back room and the way they were built, it was built off of offensive line. It was built off of a nice run game where you have Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards both unselfishly sharing reps and doing whatever's best for their team. I feel like Damian Martinez and a Mark Fletcher combo is going to be just as great, and I can't wait to watch it just because of the difference between the two. You have Damian Martinez, who's a real real quick twitch kind of guy. And then you got he can also be a bruiser as well. Obviously not like Mark Fletcher, but so we'll have the quick twitch guy, and then we'll also have Mark Fletcher, who's a ground and pound kind of guy. But then the Sam Brown edition is also amazing. Not as important as the Damian Martinez one, but I do believe adding Sam Brown is awesome because it gives guys like JoJo Trader, Jacoby George, Restrepo, number 2 now.
Horton, Isaiah Horton.
As Isaiah Horton, yes. So that's a great wide receiver room. And going into the spring, we kind of went into it not knowing whether if we were going to have a solidified wide receiver room or not. But adding JoJo there, and now you're adding Sam Brown, and you're hoping on the development of Isaiah Horton to really go, it's going to be awesome for us because one guy goes down, there's a next man up.
Dante from Q Sports Media is with us. We get this question from our guy, Pat Mack, who says, hey, Pat Mack says, I don't think we need Tyler Barron. He says, yeah, it would be a luxury, but I think a backup center would work, or give the available scholarship to one of the walk-ons. He also says, speaking of walk-ons, how many are we allowed over the 85 scholarship allotment? Yeah, they actually expanded. You're allowed to have 120 total players. Obviously, the scholarship max is 85, so you can have, how many walk-ons is that? 35? Math is not, I think that sounds right. 35 walk-ons on top of your 85 scholarship players, I think is the number. But, he mentions the phrase, we don't need Tyler Barron. Well, let me listen. Did the Heat need LeBron, Wade, and Bosh? I mean, maybe it was nice to have them. The way that I look at it, in today's college football, Dante, I don't think you can ever have too much when it comes to the defensive line, when it comes to, and Mario would say offensive line as well. Defense, I think there are certain spots where you can never have too much. And if you can add another guy with double-digit TFL from last year and, half dozen sacks in the SEC last season, I guess you could argue we don't need him, but we certainly want him, right?
Yes. Depth is one of the biggest things in football just because of how physical the sport is, especially in the trenches. If you look at last year, we had Mesidor go down. We had Nigel Lee Kelly go down. Ruben Bain stepped up and became a superstar. That's what you call depth, and that's exactly what Miami needs because that's how you find the players that really become superstars. These guys are working in practice, waiting for their chance. And I'm not saying it's good to see guys get hurt, but in football, it happens. So when you have depth and you got a guy that can come in like Barron, who's ready to play right away and can fill in a spot if need be, that's all you need for a football team, especially when you're trying to make it to the college football playoffs like the Miami Hurricanes are in 2024.
Another part of his question was having a bigger need for backup center. I know it seemed like for a bit, really early on in April, Miami looked like they were maybe in it for Jason Zandamela, but that died down quickly. He ended up at Florida. Other than that, because part of this, Dante, is best player available. Like I don't see like a really good center that's still available now in the transfer portal, but I do see a really good defensive end in Tyler Barron who's available. So it's like, by our unofficial count, I think Miami just has one scholarship left. That it seems like Barron is the guy that they're looking to use that scholarship on. But I think at this point, I don't know what the situation was a month ago looking at backup centers outside Zandamela. But right now, I don't see a great backup center available where I do see a really good defensive end available. So I think you go for BPA in this spot.
So I feel like you would go for Barron here just because of the one scholarship, and like you said, there's not many quality centers out in the transfer portal right now, at least not that we know of. You never know in college football; it can change in a snap of a finger. Tomorrow there can be a great center that comes out. You never know, but like you also said, you don't necessarily need that many scholarships anymore. We saw Cormani McClain walk on supposedly to the University of Florida. So why can't we get a guy who walks on at center? NIL is not a problem for us. I don't think it's going to be for the next couple of years. So if there is a quality center that we can get in as a walk on, just to maybe even be a backup or just another depth guy, that would be great for us.
Yeah, and that just goes to show how much college football's changed. And like I'm certainly not ripping Florida for. I think that's a great manipulation of the current, like, to be able to bring in a guy who, yes, he's fallen from grace. He needs a great comeback story right now. But to get a guy who was one of the top 2 recruits in the country a little over a year ago, 5-star cornerback, to be able to get him now on your roster, allegedly as a walk-on. That's a great manipulation of the rules, but it just goes to show you how much college football has changed, Dante, where you can offset, the need for a scholarship with name, image, and likeness now.
Yes. I know Miami Hurricane fans might not agree with me, but I do think this is a great move for the Florida Gators and Cormani. Both parties, I think, will benefit off of this. Cormani had a rough time in Colorado. I don't really want to put all of the blame on him because I don't believe that that's necessarily correct. There's times where kids come from a walk of life where they need that extra guidance and they need those people to step up in their lives and tell them things they don't really want to hear. You know, um, you don't want to throw these kind of guys under the bus to the media or say anything to bring these Florida guys down. You don't want to do that. I believe that Cormani going to Florida as a walk-on is not only going to humble him, but it'll bring that motivation and that dog out of him to want to be better and maybe get his mind right and, really just lock in on the sport of football and be as great as he really can be, because before Cormani did us dirty, we all knew the potential that he has, and I believe that potential is still there.
Now, I got a bone to pick. Now, this is not Dante's fault, but there was a prominent national publication that has predicted Miami to lose at USF, and the reason why I got a bone to pick with Dante, he's a USF grad, so is Miami going to lose to South Florida this year? You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new Friday episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, FanDuel, so many opportunities. I love betting on the UFC fights. We got playoff action in the NFL, in the NBA. It's winner take all time. FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers at FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You can pick some, easy, like minus 800 money line bet. You win $5, you win that bet. You get $150 in bonus bets after that. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Hey, guys, make sure you become a Locked On Canes insider. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours, breaking news, recruiting and transfer portal scoops, one-on-one questions and answers. We've been answering some questions from insiders today, so click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. Become a Locked On Canes insider. So we got another this is an interesting question from Ardrey from Pensacola, who says, hey, are we settled at defensive back for the fall? Dante, it seems like we are. Again, it looks like Miami is trying to make one more move in the transfer portal, and that's going to be potentially Tyler Barron, and we are going to get to the USF thing in a second, by the way. But for better or for worse, looks like Miami's done with the defensive backfield. So that means you've got to take a leap of faith from some of these younger, less experienced players. I mean, Daryl Porter, very experienced. I don't worry about him. But, we need the likes of Jadis Richard, Damari Brown, Robert Stafford, Jaden Harris, Markeith Williams, Zaquan Patterson, maybe some Isaiah Taylor action, JT's son, who came as a walk-on, by the way, came over. So we need some of these players who don't have a lot of experience to step up big time this year.
100%. I believe that Jadis Richards and Damari Brown will step up, especially after watching them compete in that Florida State game. I feel like that experience is some real great experience that every player coming through Miami needs. Playing at Florida State isn't an easy experience. It's not something is just a walk in the park. That'll boost your levels of experience in one day by a lot. And I believe that Damari Brown is going to be another one of those great cornerbacks from American Heritage, along with Daryl Porter. And then, like we've been talking about in the whole show, is depth. Adding Mac from St. Thomas Aquinas, I believe, will be awesome. His father has that grit. His father has taught him everything he needs to know to be a Miami Hurricane. And I feel like he'll be a great addition at the end of the year.
So let's talk about that USF road game for Miami coming up in September. Now, I know this is something my guy Coach Coop has talked about, this prediction. I think it was from one of the 24/7 sports writers that has he had Miami, I think, beating Florida to open the season, but losing to USF on the road. It's going to be obviously an interesting matchup because there are tie-ins. Like our Miami's favorite son, DeMarcus Van Dyke, is the defensive backs coach at USF now. Matt Merritt, who's the former USF running backs coach, now holds that job at Miami. But Dante, how worried? Because you went there, okay? So how worried should Miami fans be about playing that road game in Tampa?
I wouldn't necessarily be worried, but definitely the Canes got to come in and play because Coach Golish is going to have those kids coming out and ready. Like we talked about earlier, this is a first year in a while where the state championship is up for grabs. These kids from USF aren't taking that very lightly. These kids need to make a name for themselves. USF is still a little bit of a small school, so a lot of these guys are going to come in wanting to play Miami and play them hard because some of these kids grew up in South Florida and they want to beat Miami because they might not have gotten recruited by Miami. It's kind of that like get back situation where these kids want to go at this school because that might have been their favorite school growing up and they want to get that get back.
Yeah, that's going to be September 21st in Tampa. Game time has not been announced to that one, but I'm definitely going to that one, Dante. Like, people have been asking me which road games I'm going to go to. Two of them I know for sure. I'm definitely going to the Florida game, August 31st. We're going to have some meet and greets and some watch parties before. I guess watch party would be I'll be at the game, but we'll have some meet and greets before and afterwards. And I do plan to go to that USF game as well. Haven't decided if I'm going to go to any out-of-state games this year, but I would imagine I'm going to see you at that USF game.
Yeah, I'll most likely be at that game. I wish the new stadium was built, but it's all right. I'm excited to see what Coach Golish does with the USF program, and I'm hoping that they can reach a level where UCF's kind of at, where they get the opportunity to get to a higher level of football. I believe they can take that on.
Well, make sure you guys follow Dante on X at Q Sports Media 2, on Instagram at Q Sports Media. Dante, thank you so much for taking the time, and enjoy your weekend coming up.
Thank you, Donno. You too. Go Canes.
And thanks to everyone go Canes. And thanks to everyone to make Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.